Before we begin this video, I want to make a small announcement that YouTube flagged and completely demonetized my previous video. Because of this, I had to take it down, re-edit it, and upload a new one, which you can see right now. And if you want to see the full, original, unedited and uncensored version of my previous video, I upload it on my Patreon, and it will be completely for free. The link will be down below. Please go ahead and see this video, and let me know if you think it should be demonetized or not. Thanks so much. And now, let's begin today's episode. Putin's absolute worst nightmare is about to come true, as even more evidence of war crimes started appearing in the public. We even have one of the earliest intercepted phone calls of Putin with the Russian occupiers in Luhansk region back in 2018, which only confirms his early connections with those people. And the reaction of Russian authorities is that they acknowledged that they know that the International Tribunal is coming, but they do not care. At least not now. But more about all of this in just a couple of minutes. What's up, investors? It's the Russian dude. And let's go straight to the point and see some most recent footage. And our first video is about one of Russian film producers, Nikita Mikhalkov, who is a very big patriot, by the way. And he said that he spontaneously found this Z symbol on the floor of one of old churches. He said that this floor is at least 150-200 years old, which was long before Russia started their war, special military operation. And this symbol appearance is basically the confirmation that God is on Russian side, according to him. Does he have any evidence that these stones are 150 to 200 years old? Probably not. Does he have an evidence that this was not just a vandalism or an incident? Definitely not. But does he believe what he says? Absolutely yes. And this just gives you a basic understanding how Russian propaganda works. But in all seriousness, unfortunately, recently, Russia did another mass attack against the territory of Russia. And right here is the video of such attacks against the capital, Kiev. One of the first reactions of the local residents was to go down to the subways, which can be used as temporarily bomb shelters. And according to the local authorities, at least 10 Russian missiles were intercepted above Kiev, and among the precautious measures was that they disconnected the power grids in order to prevent further damage. Next we go to Kharkov, where even more Russian attacks were targeting energy infrastructure of Ukraine. And as we go to Kryvyi Rog, located in Zaporozhye region, the turbines of the local thermal power plant have been also severely damaged. And according to the representative of Ukrainian Air Force, Yuri Ignat, today Russia launched the record number of S-300 missiles, which was 35, and this was only against Zaporozhye and Kharkov regions alone. And then we even have some reports that the Russian missiles in the south, whenever they were flying towards their Ukrainian targets, they passed the airspace of Moldova and Romania. And then even more Ukrainian regions have been affected by Russian attacks, such as but not limited to Vinnytsia, Chernivtsi, Ivano-Frankivsk, Lviv and Zhytomyr. Some of these attacks came from Volgograd region, and as you can see from this picture, here are the trails which were seen in the sky. And then right here you can see a map of reported Russian attacks. The places with the fire symbol are those where these attacks were successful, and those with the Ukrainian flag is when the Ukrainian air defense system was more successful. And then once again, according to the Ukrainian Air Force, Russia launched 71 missiles and several drones, and Ukraine was able to intercept 61 of these missiles and at least 5 drones. All this just once again confirms two things. The first one is that even though Ukrainian air defense system is pretty good right now, it still needs improvement. And to solve this problem, the countries of Italy and France, they said that in the near future they will announce pledging their own SMP-T air defense systems. And the second thing about this mass attack is that usually Russia was doing them as a predecessor of an upcoming big offensive, which, to be honest, matches with the timing of the predictions of all the Ukrainian authorities, and most likely right now we see the very first steps of Russian Russian ultimate offensive. And as I was mentioning in my previous episodes, as long as Ukraine can hold their ground and wait until Western weapons, most likely this offensive by Russians will end in their defeat. But until then, we'll have days of intense fighting and severe events happening. And if you don't want to miss any of them as soon as they start happening, just please once again consider liking this video and subscribing to my channel. You can also follow me on Instagram because the weekends are coming and I'll try to post some stories. Alright, and before I give you an update about the rapidly developing situation in the east and the south of Ukraine, allow me to present you just 3 very quick news. The first one is that the Kremlin announced the nationwide bomb shelters checkup and maintenance, which just once again looks very suspicious in terms of timing about the upcoming Russian offensive. According to them, this is just a routine thing to do, but I will gladly disagree with them, because whenever I was a kid, I was in one of such bomb shelters, which looked nothing like a bomb shelter at all. People were just using there to store their items, to preserve food, and even to pickle vegetables. So basically, yeah, no one was taking care of them in the past, and now suddenly there is this checkup. The second news is that on February 21st, Putin is expected to address the politicians and the nation and make several statements. And the next day, February 22nd, there will be a concert with very patriotic singers and performers. And then just 2 days later, on the anniversary of Russian invasion, on February 24th, Russia is launching the batch of Swan Lake ballets, which as always have been a big predecessor of Russian problems. I mean, I know how much Russian government loves the symbolism, but all these 3 things being so close to the date of the anniversary is just once again is way too suspicious. And the third news is that according to Ukrainian authorities, every single time they were attacking Russian targets using HIMARS systems, they were relying on the coordinates presented to them by the West. And in case this is true, this is pretty much the direct confirmation that the Western allies, including especially America, they're constantly surveilling Russia and presenting this intelligence data to the Ukrainian forces. And by the way, if you are still thinking what to see during the weekends, I recently found a very interesting documentary, 1 hour long documentary about Ukrainian heroes liberating their land. It uses a lot of first-person footage, interviews, and it also has the English subtitles, and I will leave the link to this documentary on my Patreon completely for free. You can find all of these links down below. Alright, and now as promised, let me give you a brief update about the situation in the east and the south. And first of all, according to the Russian resources, they were able to capture this small settlement Dvorichne. And then according to the report by the Institute for the Study of War, one of the main concentration of Russian attacks was along Svatovo-Kreminna highway. As we go to another hot spot in the east of Ukraine, to Bakhmut, another major concentration of Russian forces is spotted to the south of Ivanovsk. The goal of Russians is to capture this settlement and establish the control over this highway, which will allow them in the future, best case scenario for them, obviously, to surround Bakhmut city. But as for now, all of these attacks are being successfully repelled by Ukrainians. Going more to the south, even more heavy fighting has been reported from Vuhledar, with Russians constantly attacking Ukrainian positions. In addition to that, Russians are reportedly bringing their elite forces Spetsnaz to attack the city, but Ukrainians are successfully repelling these attacks as well. And then, even according to the Russian infiltrator in Donetsk Denis Pushilin, he ordered the so-called evacuation of civilians from Vuhledar to Volnovakha. And then going even more to the west, to the key city in the south, Melitopol, very loud noises have been reported from Melitopol airfield. And if you remember from my previous episodes, this is just one of the places where Russians were concentrating their helicopters and military planes. And before I talk about the recently discovered new evidence of the war crimes of the Russian forces, let's briefly take a look at this map, which shows us the changes in territorial control. And first of all, as you can see right here, Russians were able to advance a little bit to the south of Mirne and Luhivske. As we go to Soledar, right here we can see the changes in the front lines in the last couple of days. And then going all the way to the north, we can see that Russians were able to get closer to Ukrainian front line, and looks like, yes, they were able to capture Dvorichne. But one of the most important events of the recent days is that whenever Russian occupiers were fleeing long time ago from Balaklia, they accidentally forgot or lost their USB flash drive, which contained hundreds of documents documenting their war crimes against civilians. And using these documents, Ukrainians are now able to identify officers, soldiers and generals who are giving out these inhumane orders. But among these people, there are not just the military personnel. There are also representatives of the temporary occupying authorities of Luhansk region. And the involvement of such politicians in war crimes, who are in one way or another reporting to Vladimir Putin, in the future this will help to prove the responsibility of Putin himself. We even have some documents reporting the orders that Russians were seizing the civilian infrastructure to use it later as their military bases, and in case Ukrainians attack these buildings, Russians will say, look at these Ukrainians, they are the ones who are targeting residential buildings. There was obviously more simple evidence, which was documenting the orders to take out problematic locals, and something as just collecting intelligence data and reconnaissance, obviously forcing civilians to give out this knowledge. And ultimately, there were documents which were proving that those military representatives who were sanctioned since 2018 of being war criminals, there once again were spotted in Ukraine doing exactly the same. But like mentioned previously, this is just the tip of the iceberg. There are hundreds more documents to investigate, and in the future this will most certainly be helpful for the future prosecutions of the highest Russian authorities. But wait, there is more. Recently, for the very first time ever, the intercepted phone call between Vladimir Putin himself and the Russian infiltrator in Luhansk back from 2017, Igor Plotnitsky, and this phone call has been released. This phone call implies the involvement of the Russian president with the leaders of Russian occupying authorities on the territory of Ukraine, and one of the questions they were discussing about supplying weapons to these groups of people. And I mean, even though they might not have mentioned this question directly, this was mentioned as, let's meet and talk about this in person. And I mean, you can already guess what it's going to be about. And yes, by the way, the full version of this phone conversation will be available on my Patreon, and if you join right now, there is 1 week of free trial. And so, what's the reaction of the Russian authorities, such as for example the press secretary Dmitry Peskov, who said that he cannot confirm whether this phone call was real, but he neither can refute it. Which basically means most likely it is real. And obviously, if Russia loses in this war and all this evidence will be presented to the respective authorities, I mean, even Russian government, they say that they acknowledge that they know that the International Tribunal is coming, but they do not care. I mean, at least now. And speaking about this International Tribunal, back in the late January, the European Parliament has already voted to establish it against Putin and Alexander Lukashenko, the president of Belarus, and 472 members voted in favor of establishing International Tribunal, while only 19 said that they decline. And since then, they already approved at least one major point of this upcoming tribunal, is that the Russian aggression against Ukraine started not on February 24th, 2022, but back in 2014. Which means that everything that happened between this big time frame will be included to prosecute those responsible. The European Union will also create the center in Hague to collect the evidence of war crimes of Russia. And the potential dates when this international tribunal will be fully functionable is as early as summer of 2023. And so yes, even though it is Russia who launched its recent massive offensive, Ukraine only needs one chance, and as soon as they start receiving the Western weapons and military vehicles, the defeat of Russia is inevitable. And then the Russian authorities will care way more about the International Tribunal. But for now, we are potentially in the beginning of the end, and if you don't want to miss any of these events as soon as they start happening, just please once again subscribe to my channel, it only takes one click. And if you want to support my work financially, please consider becoming my channel member, use a PayPal link, or become my Patreon, where there is still 1 week of free access. All the other useful links can be found to the right and down below. Thank you so much for your attention, товарищи, and see you on Tuesday.